Recording. Okay, Eric, go ahead.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Eric Stoner, one of the co-founders and editors of Waging Nonviolence. And I want to welcome you to our interactive webinar today titled Acting in Good Faith, Religion, Peace Building, and Nonviolent Action. We're happy to be one of the co-conveners today, along with Solidarity 2020 and Beyond and Nonviolence International. Let me just say a few words about Waging Nonviolence. We're an online publication dedicated to providing original reporting and expert analysis on social movements and activism around the world. We work to advance the public's understanding of how ordinary people build power and their key role in shaping politics. Since our founding in 2009, we have put a special focus on overlooked movements in the global South and try to facilitate cross-cultural knowledge and skill sharing in the process. You can find us at wagingnonviolence.org. I want to just go over the structure for today's webinar panel and some guidelines and procedures. We are streaming live on Zoom, and we'll be monitoring and on Facebook Live, and we'll be monitoring comments and questions in both places. So feel free to comment on Facebook as well. This event is being recorded, and by participating, you are agreeing to the webinar being reposted on the YouTube channels of Waging Nonviolence and Solidarity 2020. This panel is scheduled for 90 minutes and will include brief presentations and overviews by the panelists and discussions among the group. The last 20 minutes will be open for discussion, comments, and Q&A with the participants. If you have questions, please type them into the chat, and when called upon by the moderator, you'll have the option of unmuting and asking your question directly, or we can read it for you. We know that people have different perspectives and positions and welcome those, but we ask that you communicate these respectfully, or we will delete comments and or remove you from the event if need be. Next, I'd like to turn it over to Nimesh Wijwardani from Nonviolence International, another co-sponsor and long-term peace and justice organization.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nimesh Wijwardani, and as Eric mentioned, I'm an intern at Nonviolence International. I want to join Eric in welcoming you all to this webinar. Thank you for attending. I wanted to say a few words about NVI as an organization. NVI was founded by Palestinian activist Mubarak Awad in 1989. We advocate for active nonviolence and support creative, constructive nonviolent campaigns around the world. We are a backbone organization of the nonviolent movement, providing fiscal sponsorship to partners all over the globe. And we tell the transformative stories of dynamic, emerging nonviolent movements that give us hope in difficult times and are reshaping what we view as possible. Our director, Michael Beer, recently published a monograph, Civil Resistance Tactics in the 21st Century, which updates Gene Sharp's classic work. And I encourage you all to download the book, read it, and help us get it into new hands. I also encourage you to check out our YouTube channel, where you will find webinars and interviews with nonviolent activists. And now I'll hand it over to Catherine.
Thank you very much, Nimesh. Great to hear from you. Nonviolence International is now our fiscal sponsor and is such amazing interns that we've met over the years. And we really appreciate Michael and David for supporting our initiative. I want to welcome everyone from around the world today for this fascinating and really important webinar, Acting in Good Faith, Religion, Peace Building, and Nonviolent Action. This is our second in our fall series. We had a last series in the winter spring that was also 6 webinars. And we're really focusing our webinars on grassroots organizing and nonviolent action for change. Solidarity 2020 and Beyond is a network and growing coalition of organizations, activists, scholars, journalists, and psychosocial practitioners. We believe in the power of ordinary people to organize and mobilize for change. They are focused on injustices in their local communities, and by extension, they're actually changing the world. We believe that this pandemic is a key trigger moment, providing new opportunities for systemic change, dangerous new realities as well. And we've been seeing increased teen pregnancies, domestic violence, poverty, livelihood issues, and oppression around the world since COVID-19 hit. Our website is solidarity2020andbeyond.org if you'd like to look us up. And you can also check us out and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you're an activist, join our Global Grassroots Activist Network. We call it the GJAN, now with 150 plus members from 70 plus countries and over 100 campaigns and movements around the world. And again, if you'd like to join, you could chat in the chat box, put your information, we'll contact you, or contact us at solidarity2020andbeyond@gmail.com. I want to thank our great team that helps us put these together, our Assistant Director, Steve Chase, who is working on technical issues today and helped organize this webinar, co-founders and Rotary Peace Fellows, Marita Rainbird from Finland and Vedran Obacina from Croatia. Father Vedran will be moderating our panel discussion today. And he's got this amazing and broad background. He's really quite a Renaissance man. He specializes in the Balkans, the Mediterranean, the Middle East, the Caucasus, and Central Asia. He's authored a book called The Political System of the Islamic Republic of Iran and holds an MA in political science from the University of Zagreb and is completing his PhD at the University of Regensburg in Germany. His academic work is broadly focused, but really mostly on religion and politics, again, in that region, but also he travels around the world working on these issues. He's a priest in the Old Orthodox Catholic Church and is a secretary of the Archbishop. He participates in conflict prevention and resolution, conferences, research, writing on the Balkans and the Middle East, especially with the International Interreligious Institute in Qom, Iran, and the Al-Amani Center in Oman. He also is a journalist. He writes in many papers and online programs. He's contributed often to Al Jazeera. And he's also a food connoisseur and has a blog when he travels around the world and keeps us up to date on interesting restaurants and culture and food. So we're really great to have Vedran moderating this panel today. And it was a real pleasure having him as a Rotary Peace Fellow in Chulalongkorn University in the mid-career program in Thailand, where we met in 2020. Go ahead, Vedran.
Thank you very much and welcome everyone. Thank you for this beautiful introduction. I wouldn't be able to say it myself. I only remember one thing. It was a very hot night in Bangkok in beginning of monsoon season when we decided that Solidarity 2020 and beyond should exist. And I'm so thankful to both Catherine and Marita for being there and to encourage this, especially to Catherine, who had such huge energy to make it work, and also to our partners. So, of course, as you can see, I'm a cleric, and it might be somewhat interesting that a cleric is contributing to nonviolence action and to NGOs and to the peace building, because religious institutions also often have an ambiguous position in any kind of political action, and especially when the peace building is concerned. Whatever the religion, I think the basic theology of everyone is to foster peace and to be on the peace side. And this is one of the basic pillars of support which you as peace builders and non-violent action partners can do, especially because religious institutions often have presence in every single village, in every single part of the world. So today we have here excellent 4 panelists, and let me introduce you to them, because they will talk to you about their experiences, and also they will talk about the possibilities that you can think about when you engage religious people or religious institutions in your country and in your community. First of all, I would welcome here Pastor Daniel Chay, who is the founder and senior pastor of the New Life Church of South Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. In 2019, he was a participant in nonviolent action trainings in Burma and Indonesia. And since 2001, he has worked on building and organizing the Christian Churches Peace Network in Laos, Thailand, and Cambodia. He also has promoted interfaith dialogue in those countries among Christians and Buddhists to encourage solidarity and collaborative nonviolent initiatives. He is a member of Solidarity 2020 and beyond through the Global Grassroots Action Network. From Afghanistan comes Ahmadullah Archiwal. He is an Afghan scholar activist who has written books and manuals on nonviolent action and conducted several nonviolence and civic mobilization trainings for grassroots activists across several provinces of Afghanistan, including Kunar, Khost, Kabul, Kunduz, and Paktia. Whoever knows about Afghanistan should know that these are really, really challenging provinces. His research specialty is on nonviolent campaigns from the Islamic world, including the Khudai Khidmatkar movement that was waged in today's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa by Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan. Elizabeth Kanin Kimau is a Kenyan grassroots peace builder. She is the founder of Horn of Africa Grassroots Peace Forum. She has 12 years experience in building a culture of peace in regions fragmented by prolonged inter-ethnic violence, and that is northern Kenya and southern Sudan. In her peace work, Kanini focuses on capacity building for grassroots people who are affected by violent conflicts to be agents of their own peace. Currently, she is a PhD student at Center of Nonviolence, Durban University of Technology in South Africa. And finally, we have Benjamin Lutz, who is the Director of Communications and Operations for Mediators Beyond Borders International, a global organization and network of mediators that support international peace-building efforts through effective mediation. He is also an IEP, Institute for Economics and Peace, ambassador, as am I, and Rotary Peace Activator. Furthermore, he's currently a PhD student in Religion, Reconciliation, and Peace at the University of Winchester in the United Kingdom, focusing on interfaith dialogue efforts in Oman and Lebanon. I welcome you all, and I wish you all to have a very good discussion about this topic, which in my opinion is extremely important, because if you don't have this pillar of support that I was mentioning, it would be quite hard to go to the grassroots. So I will begin with Pastor Daniel, and I would ask you, as a peace builder in Southeast Asia and as a Christian, you employ religion-based action in an interfaith environment. What is the right approach to take in such circumstances? And how can Buddhist Christian cooperation foster a nonviolent action against often oppressive regimes? Pastor Daniel, this is your moment.
Okay, thank you, Bertrand, for introducing my name and what I do. And hello, everybody. Exciting to be part of this. How do we approach to the Christian and Buddhists in Laos and Thai and Cambodia and beyond those areas around there? Well, I believe that I think you tell the 2019, that was my last year, but I've been to Laos before then, but really I get started is 2001 to get to more organized and building network there with Christian different part of the country and Cambodia and Laos and Thailand. I go to a different area and visit the churches and visit the community leaders and talk about what need in the local base need. And so we meeting, we talk, we meet, and we build relationship and build trust with each other. Talk to the leaders who I trust, who they are potential leader. So we approach that way, and this is how we deal with our own culture. Pretty much Laos and Cambodia and Thailand, pretty much the same culture. So since then, I have been taught leadership, and I have been training leadership around those. Sometimes I have to bring them out to Thailand because of in Laos a little more strict, and also in Cambodia a little more strict in terms of human rights. But gathering in Thailand is more peaceful to do things that we need to do. And so that's how I build pretty much the leadership there. And they are come enjoy since then, and I have a good relationship with them. That's all I can say. Thank you. Back to you.
Pastor Daniel, thank you for giving us so much time to discuss this. And of course, I am sure that many people will try to ask you about your experience, how to introduce your ideas to the religious institutions. You are a cleric like I am, and it often feels that we are a bit alienated from the society, at least from the NGOs that want to have some kind of change in their own societies. I think there will be a lot of question about this, especially from our members who are seeking to have support from institutions like religious ones. And when we are talking about this connection to the religious institutions, but also to foster change in the society, I think it is very welcome to hear this experience from Ahmadullah in Afghanistan. And of course, when the general public thinks of Afghanistan, many see the violent Taliban-based Islamic movement seeking total power. Yet you point to the peaceful understanding of Islam, and you make people recognize the non-violent potential of Islam. So how do you do it? And what is the role of Islam-based non-violent action today in Afghanistan, but also globally? Ahmadullah, please tell us how this is done. Thank you.
So thank you so much. Thank you, Eric, Catherine, and Steve, and Wedran. You know, we started teaching nonviolence in 2012. Since 2012, we have been involved in teaching nonviolence, and our focus is mainly religious scholars, university teachers, and youths. The whole idea behind teaching nonviolence was to empower people for change. This was the whole philosophy of our activities. The way we did it, when we started teaching nonviolence, I can say that there was no one to teach nonviolence or to get involved in nonviolence. We were actually the pioneer of teaching nonviolence in Afghanistan. So we started from developing a theory of nonviolence. We have a lot of literature that's for different countries, but in my situation, we had to contextualize the available literature on nonviolence. When we say contextualize, my point is contextualizing it culturally and also religiously. And we approached to nonviolence from two angles. The first angle was dealing with nonviolence as a tool. And the second approach was dealing with nonviolence is spiritually. So when it comes to using nonviolence as a tool, I think there is no need for discussion. It means that everyone can use it as a tool. But when it comes to spirituality or to justifying nonviolence on the basis of Islam or culture, then it poses a lot of questions to the people. And many people ask questions about it. So we focus on developing theoretical background for making connections between nonviolence and Islam. And I can say from the work that I have done so far is I found a number of converging points between nonviolence and Islam. And, you know, based on those points, I was able to tell people or to at least to make the argument that nonviolence has relations with Islam. And the first point was motives. When it comes to motives of Islam for a human society, I think it's the same as nonviolence. Like if you study Islam, the basic motive of Islam was to make a justice world. Same is true with nonviolence. If you look at the nonviolent movements throughout the world, everywhere, the basic idea of waging nonviolent struggles are to bring justice to society or to bring justice to the target people, though you may name it differently, but the whole idea is to give justice to the people. So this was one point. The second point was avoidance of non-violence. It's a very conflicted topic that many people believe that when it comes to struggle in Islam, jihad is the only way to wage a struggle. I think jihad itself means a different thing for different people, but you know, given the time that I have, I would just say that jihad has 13 different types, and violent jihad is one type of it. Then we have hadith from the Prophet, and then we have many verses from Holy Quran which justifies struggle for a justice cause is jihad. Like there is a hadith which says that standing in front of a dictator and challenging his action is the best jihad, and you do it non-violently. So I think the second converging point was avoidance of non-violence, of violence. The third point was approach to conflict. Like many people believe that conflict is something that is not acceptable in Islam, but if you study Islamic literature, but there are different arguments, but there are scholars who believe that from Islamic point of view, conflict is considered a natural phenomena. And when it comes to nonviolent movements, I think the basic understanding should be there about conflict in non-violence is that conflict is a natural phenomena. It's not a human created phenomena. So this is a third converging point. The fourth point is activism. Like many people believe that, you know, like Islam is just a latent religion, but it's not theoretically, it's the other way around. Islam encourages activism. It says that if you see an evil thing, you have to stand against it. So these are the converging points on the basis of which I developed some theory, and when I teach nonviolence, we discuss the relationship between nonviolence and Islam on basis of that. And then, then we have historical examples. For example, Imam Hussein is the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, and he was killed just a few years after the after the Prophet died. And the reason for his death killing was that he stood against the ruler. The ruler was Muslim. He stood against him because Imam Hussein, the grandson of the Prophet, believed that he is not up to the job and he was not a legitimate ruler. So what he did, Imam Hussein did a sort of civil disobedience. He did a non-cooperation. We call it bayat. Bayat means like today's voting. So everyone, according to the Islamic rules at that time, was supposed to shake hands with the ruler and give him his submission. But Imam Hussein tried not to do it. He denied his bayat or submission to the ruler. And, he left that Medina and he went to Kufa. And then, there was a sort of fighting, and at the end he got killed. So we are not talking about how he killed, and we are not talking about the last part of his moment or his campaign. But his campaign, the campaign of Imam Hussein, starts from non-cooperation. So there are many other historical examples of non-violence, which shows that there is a strong link between non-violence and Islam. For example, if you look at the idea of jihad, there are 30 verses about jihad in Quran. 6 of them were revealed in Mecca, and the remaining of them were revealed in Medina. So when the Prophet was in Mecca, he was not involved in any sort of fighting. He was just inviting people. He would go to people's house. He would go door to door and invite people to Islam. So his whole struggle in Mecca was actually about non-violent civic mobilization or non-violence. There are so many other examples in the contemporary history of non-violent movements in Islamic world. We can give the example of Khudai Khidmatgar Bacha Khan. He was someone who, to some extent, was educated in religious madrasas in India before 1947, and then he led a movement which is called Khudai Khidmatgar. He had 200,000 non-armed soldiers that are called Khudai Khidmatgar, or servants of God. This guy spent 38 years of his life in the prisons of Pakistan and also in the prison of British India. So there are a lot of contemporary examples of non-violence, and when we teach non-violence, we quote we use those examples as references. Do I have more time?
Yes, you have.
Yeah. So then when it comes to like other non-violent movements, we can give example of the Arab Spring. Arab Spring was in Tunisia, Egypt, and then in Libya, and so many other Middle Eastern countries. In some countries it was successful, but in others it was not successful. But I think it can become a very good example of the contemporary non-violent movements in Islamic world. Iranian Revolution was another example. And then, in our history, 550 years ago, in Afghanistan, we had someone who was struggling against the Indian ruler. Those Indian rulers were also Mughal, they were also Muslims, but they were very cruel, and they were cruel particularly to some ethnic groups. So this guy stood against them, and he came up with three principles for his campaign, and those principles were non-cooperation, disobedience, and what's the third one? So these are these three. He came up with these three principles, and he said that if we want to campaign or struggle against the Mughals or against the ruler of Delhi at that time, he said that we should not cooperate with them, we should avoid them, and we should not do business with them. And if you look at the literature of nonviolence of today, like if you look at the modern literature on nonviolence, you would find these three examples. There are many, many other examples in our culture that we can connect to nonviolence, and then we can establish a relationship between our culture and our religion and nonviolence. Unfortunately, the connection between nonviolence and Islam is a subject that's under-researched. There are a limited number of people who study nonviolence and the connection between nonviolence and Islam. I think, but now things have started changing, and with the passage of time, I think things will be different. But, you know, for us, I think it was a good starting point. And those converging points, plus the historical references of nonviolent in Islamic world, they become a great resource for us. So in the beginning, when we started teaching nonviolence, we had a lot of problems. Many people were not receptive to it. They believed that nonviolence is a philosophy that has come from other cultures, many people associated with Hinduism and other philosophies. But our argument was the other way around. My argument is, Wedran said in the beginning, that all these religions that we have, they invite people to peace. And Islam has a lot of such examples. But historically, if you study this whole idea of jihad, many people, particularly rulers, they have changed this whole idea. Like, no one talks about jihad with pen. No one talks about jihad against evil. No one talks about jihad against corruption. No one talks about jihad against poverty, because, you know, our rulers unfortunately changed it, and they exploited this idea of jihad from the 11th century onward. So the whole idea is that there is need for more people and for more research on the topic. But to summarize it, I think there is there is strong link between Islam and nonviolence. And I think if that link is utilized and further research, it could provide a very interesting and useful literature. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Ahmadullah. I think it is extremely important nowadays to talk about Islamic approach to peace building, because there is so many misconceptions about what Islam is. And in general, it makes a quite different image of Islam today. And this also is relevant for African continent. But what I want to focus here is not just a single denomination, but how also non-clerical institutions engage in religion-based peace building. Kanini, religious identity is among the strongest ones in the world. And according to many estimations, over 80% of the population worldwide believes in some kind of divine power. So it is not just us clerics who do so, but so many other people. How do you personally employ religion in your peace-building activities? And especially, what is the role of women in it, which is often disregarded and misunderstood by majority male clergy, which I can attest from my own experience. Please, Kanini, tell us more about that.
Thank you so much. I am going to respond to this question, highlighting 2 points on the potential of religion in building deeply divided communities. And I will also share how religion has helped me to insert myself in ethnic groups which have been deeply divided by violence, and which are patriarchal, where women have no voice at all. First, northern parts of Kenya, where I've been working, has been marginalized for many years since independence by the government in terms of security and development. All this time, the religion, especially the Catholic Church, I've been with the people, providing all the social services. And many people regarded religion as the government because it provided everything for them. And they built very strong trust on the religion. Therefore, there was that strong trust where they listened to religious leaders because they were their everything during that time. Secondly, I found that religion in northern part of Kenya, the area is divided by ethnic wars. And you find religion is connected to the warring community. For instance, out of my experience, I focus on Borana and Rendile violence. Those are two tribes in northern Kenya. And you found, for instance, the Catholic Church was connected to the Boranas, and there was also Catholic Church among the Rendiles. There was Muslims among the Boranas, Muslim among the Rendiles, and this applied to other Christian denominations around there. And then I saw the potential. I found these grassroots people had only one leader. Like the priest who presided mass among the Rendiles also presided the same mass among the Boranas. And the same applied to the Islamic religion. And I thought this was a very strong potential when it comes to building peace. Then what happened is the second part of this was my own experience. I was a woman entering into a patriarchal society where women have no voice, where women are not listened to elders. So it was very difficult for me to go and start building peace among these two ethnic groups. And another aspect which I found was these kind of ethnic groups were very divided by cycles of violence. And there was so much hatred among themselves, enmity, and deadly revenge attacks. So this broken relationship posed a very big challenge to any attempts of dialogue or any attempts for peace. And then I decided first to overcome the challenge being a woman going into a patriarchal society. I knew the Catholic bishop. I approached him and expressed my interest in contributing to peace in this region, and he was very happy. He referred me to other religious leaders, but some rejected me. Being a woman going into such deep violence, they thought it was not possible. And also some thought there was no way I can address the elders being a woman. And another thing was, I did not have resources, and this conflict, many resources have been spent and nothing happened. So what happened is, I never lost hope. I went to another priest and he was happy I can contribute anything to the violence. Therefore, he accepted me to be accompanying him when he was going to various communities to celebrate Mass. So I accompanied him, excuse me, when he was going among the Rendiles, and he could give me an opportunity to greet the people, only to greet the people. And I could accompany him when he's going among the Boranas. Several attempts and several visits enabled women, because mostly there you could find the majority of women going to church. They knew me. And then I started by expressing my interest of going to stay with them. And they accepted me. Then I left the church and I went to live at the Grassroot with the people. And because they knew, when I went first to the community, because I was taken by the priest, the elders still did not believe a woman can teach their children, because I wanted first to start teaching the children who have been displaced by war, as I create a relationship with the people. The elders felt that I cannot manage. They thought I was a very small girl and I cannot manage to teach their children. But because I trusted the church, the priest ensured them I have the potential to do that. And then they accepted and I went to stay with the people. Living with the people, I started building relationship with the grassroots people. I even understood the violence deeper and deeper. I also understood that I knew the people and the key people in the community. And that is how, when the people now started, after some time, the elders accepted me. And they even accepted me to speak to them, even to address them standing as a woman. And after this acceptance, I saw the potential of the church and religion in general, because we have Islam and Christianity and the traditional elders there who are highly respected by the grassroots people. Therefore, I mobilized the grassroots religious leaders. And what I did is I saw their potential in helping to unite the people who are deeply divided by the violence. I conscientized them. I created a lot of awareness because I was living with them day and night. I was with them, and in the evening I was with them. So I was able to slowly conscientize the key people in those communities. Then later on, they accepted to come together because I was like a bridge to them. Because the Boranas accepted me and the Rendires accepted me. I was like a bridge. They accepted me to bring them together. So I asked the religious leaders if they can come together and discuss ways in which they can themselves solve the conflict, because I saw so much potential in the religious people and at the grassroots people in solving this prolonged violence, which have been difficult to solve in future. Therefore, when these religious leaders came together, Muslim, Christians, and elders, they all came together. And then they decided this month they will be praying among the Rendires. Next month, and they are praying as a team. They are going to worship as a team. Next month, they decided they will be going as a team to pray among the Boranas, the other ethnic group they are warring with. And when the Christian leaders, when the religious leaders united themselves, it was easy for them now to bring the other people together. Wherever they went, I was only with them, but I was not leading them. They were the leaders. Wherever they went, they could speak to the people and they could invite other people. And then what happened? They came with the idea, why can't we approach our top leaders, the bishops, the imams? Because they share the same. They share the same bishop, they share the same imam. They say, why can't we approach these leaders so that when we are praying, they can come and lead us with prayer? And they liked the idea, and they went as a team they started with the Catholic bishop. And the Catholic bishop liked the idea, and because at the top level, they have interreligious leaders group, they also informed the other leaders, and they started going on and on with this kind of worship. And this worship brought a lot of people together. The people, because they used to have lunch together, people came and shared meal. The meal was prepared by both Rendire and Borana people. They all collected firewood together. They cooked together, and they prepared the choir, the singing together. And during this time, they could sleep in the community where they are. And this was a very good opportunity to bond the people. The people started now.
Thank you so very much. Let's continue with this talk in the second round of questions. And unfortunately, Ahmadullah has to go, but before he goes, and of course, I'm certain that everyone can reach him for personal communication, but I would like to ask him before he goes one question. Well, it's several questions, in fact, but everything is connected. Of course, that we see that majority Islamic countries today have many problems with violence and authoritative regimes. And I do not want to say that it is connected to Islam, because of course there are so many other countries which are not Islamic and in the same position. But can we reach a local imam with very practical peace building proposition, like Kanin just mentioned right now? And also you mentioned Imam Hussein, which gave me some thoughts, because Shia denomination chose to stay passive for so long, and basically until the Islamic Revolution in 1979 in Iran. So where is this thin borderline between theology and action? How can a Muslim practicing peace builder engage with their peace-building practice. So can you tell us just very shortly about this? Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I think the first question about limited number of non-violent movements in Islamic world is the first reason is lack of awareness of non-violence. Like many people believe that non-violence is a weaker tool of struggle. And, you know, they believe that violence is the only available tool in the market. And, you know, if they use violence, then we have this cycle of violence. And when it comes to when it comes to violence, it's difficult for the people to win from the government, because government has all these resources and these groups don't have these resources. So for me, I think the most important reason for that is the lack of awareness of non-violence. And, you know, it takes a lot of time. I'm speaking for myself, for people to teach non-violence in societies like ours, to justify the use of it, to justify it on the basis of religion. So this is the level of understanding of non-violence. And I think with the increased know-how on non-violence, things will change. So local imams, you talk about local imams in peace building. I strongly believe, I would tell you my experience. I was working as director for public outreach in the Afghanistan Election Commission. And my job was to educate people and motivate them to vote. So one of the challenges that we faced was to encourage women to come forward and vote. And when I was director, we worked with local imams. And in that year, we were able to have a turnout of women, 34% of turnout of women. And then one of the reasons was we worked with religious scholars, we worked with imams, and they were very helpful. So we did a survey afterwards, and, you know, in the survey, we realized that after radio stations, the second source of information, or the second most important medium of communication, were religious scholars. So that's for our society, and I believe that they are influential. So you said about Imam Hussein. Yeah, so he was actually pioneer of, not pioneer, but he did this phenomenal job of disobedience. He stood to a tyrant ruler, and he was able to wage his violence, his campaign. So you are right that Shia, we respect Imam Hussein. Every Muslim respects Imam Hussein. If he's Sunni or Shia, it's a different situation, but Sunni Shias try to take ownership of him, but I believe that he is respectful for every Muslim. So the reason that many people in many Shias are not involved in non-violence, I think maybe because maybe political, because Iran is considered a sort of Shia leader of Shia community in the world, and they had their own successful non-violent movement when Khomeini took over. But I also believe that they have been involved in a number of non-violent movements, like in Bahrain, they were involved in non-violent movement. Then the movement was crushed, and in so many other countries, like in the Middle East, they were involved in non-violent movements. I don't know much details about it, but I'm sure that they have been involved in non-violent self-mobilization in many areas.
Thank you, Ahmadullah, and we are all aware that you have to go. So thank you so much for participating here. We wish you all the best, especially in the circumstances where Afghanistan is today. And keep in touch. Of course, we are all here. In any case, whatever we can help or contribute to your work, we are here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and we will be in touch. You all stay safe. Bye-bye.
Yeah. So before we go to the questions which already are coming in, which I'm very glad, we will just have another, so our final panelist, Benjamin. Benjamin, you're coming from a more global level of peace building and mediation. So the question is, where and how do you employ religion in your work, both as an activist in Mediator Beyond Borders International, as an international organization, and as a PhD researcher? And also regarding this work you do you think religion is still a missing part of peace building and violence today? Please.
Absolutely, and thank you again so much for this opportunity to engage. It's a very timely and important conversation, and I'm just honored to be a part of this conversation today. So really, there's sort of two hats that I bring to this discussion, and I'm going to focus primarily on MBBI firstly. That's Mediators Beyond Borders International, in a very similar vein to many of the co-hosts of today's talk. And the biggest thing that I've seen and noticed at MBBI and several peacebuilding organizations, which I think is a very positive thing, is focusing primarily on these three aspects that I just put in the chat so you can see them as I talk through them all, which is locally led, trauma-informed, capacity building, mediation, peace building, development work. Fill in the last sentence is totally fine, but those three sections are really crucial. I will include religion in this, I promise, but I'm just going to talk more holistically about the peace building world that I work in, and that is probably relevant to many of the things that each of you do, our wonderful audience listening today. So first and foremost, I think locally led is the only way to be successful in any peace building initiative. The people that live in the community that's affected by a conflict, if they are not a part of that process to solve that conflict will not be solved. End of sentence. That may be a hot take, but that's one I'm going to stand by. I think it's really valuable to include those that are directly affected and live in that environment to be a part of the process in every step of the way. And so a lot of the things that MBBI and many of the work that each of you do is really primarily focused on the locally led component. In a lot of local communities, religious identity or even the conflict is of a religious nature is paramount to understanding the nuances, the cultural aspects, the context, etc. And if you don't include those pieces there, if you don't include things that are relevant to the religious community or utilize religious teachings when it comes to the peace building practice, or if it's a religious conflict, whatever the case may be, again, it will not be successful, quite frankly. Trauma-informed is also a very important component. Most conflicts have a trauma component. Actually, I'm going to say all. All conflicts have a trauma component underlying. Very much may be related to religion, very much may not be. But regardless, if you aren't aware of the underlying trauma, the historical dimensions, again, the context, the local aspects, you're not going to be successful because you may solve the overlying conflict, but not the underlying trauma that would lead more future conflicts to happen. And the last thing, and I think is also quite crucial, is capacity building. So providing training, mentoring, coaching, whatever the ing word may be, the ability for the local community to ensure they don't revert back to a violent conflict space, and they're able to progress and grow and build that capacity. Those three pieces of global peace building is the cornerstone of MBBI, the cornerstone of what I do with my job, and very probably what many of you do here being interested in this theme. I think the aspect of religion is very, very, very fascinating, and for me is very much relevant to all three of these pieces, but most importantly locally led, undoubtedly, because again, the religious traditions of that community or the religious nature of the conflict or both need to be well understood and included in the discussions, mediation, dialogue, peace building, whatever the practice may be, to ensure that the conflict is successfully and fully resolved. I think including religion is a great question, and sort of answer your second question, Bedron, first, I absolutely think religion is the missing piece of the peace building and nonviolence movements, undoubtedly. So many conflicts, whether they're not religious in nature, ignore the religious dimensions of the community or of the people in the conflict. The conflict itself may not be religious, but the trauma, the local, the context, the capacity, everything is related to the religious nature. And so to ignore it, I frankly think it's a disservice to conflict and peace building in general, because you aren't paying attention. You as a generic peace builder, or even you as the local person, are not paying attention to the realities, the holistic aspect that makes this community undergo conflict, the ways to solve it. Well, you need to include religious identity in some space. I'm not saying you need to have a religious summit before you do peace building. If that's necessary, great. That's not what I'm advocating for. What I'm saying is that if you don't include the local components that make up this community and aren't attuned to what those nuances are, the conflict won't be solved, quite frankly. In terms of sort of my PhD, which I'll shift a little bit to chat a bit about, but I really kind of want to stay in this MBBI space, because I think it's an interesting aspect of a sort of a global peacebuilding organization in relation to the great hosts of this organization and this audience member and what each of your works are focusing on. But separately, I'll just put on my PhD hat for a second. I've started a PhD sort of focusing on interfaith dialogue efforts in the Middle East and how to utilize religion in a dialogue space that is relevant and understanding to what actually the nuance of the community may be. It may not be a religious conflict, and that doesn't matter. It's important more than anything to include those religious spaces. So my PhD is focusing on this type of dialogue that we do at Mediators Beyond Borders called reflective structured dialogue, which for me is a quintessential space to perspective gain, learn from the identities and perspectives and awarenesses and philosophies of everyone else around the community before you even start the peace building. So you actually have a dialogue of just, what is your perspective on this? What is your thoughts? And for me, I am looking at that sort of dialogue, infusing it in a Middle Eastern context in Arabic as well, but engaging with the religious dimensions of those communities. So very much to answer that question, Vedran, I also think in the academic space, on top of the peace building and mediation and nonviolence spaces, religion is also being completely overlooked in these spaces. It is so crucial to the dimensions of most global communities. I mean, I'm based in the United States, and you could argue that America is not as religiously focused. There are very religious people in this country, and religion is a very big part of daily life, but not necessarily culturally or at least countrywide. Most other countries internationally, religion is one of the foremost parts of culture. And I think it's really fascinating to me that religion has not really been in most spaces talked about, only really unless in the negative space, as Ahmadullah mentioned previous in the Islamic traditions, but in many other religious traditions as well, religion is really only seen in the research I have done and in my studies in a sort of negative, violent related space. Whereas I am arguing here pretty strongly in my PhD and in my full-time job at Mediators Beyond Borders International, that religion absolutely is a missing piece of the peace building process. If you don't include the local capacity, the nuances of the community, the context, the culture, etc., and especially the trauma that may be a part of the religious identities or just overlooked anyways, the conflict will not be solved. And so, that's sure maybe a hot take, but one I'm going to stand by, because I think it's really influential and important to recognize that religious identities, faith tradition, practices, etc., are a part of the peace building space, because it includes the local nuance dimensions there. To sort of go back and answer your first question, I know I answered the second one first. Where do I specifically employ religion in the work that I do? For my PhD, I mean, it's the center of my dissertation, including and engaging religious communities using this dialogue practice in the Middle East is what I'm researching. So very much in the forefront of the interfaith dialogue that I'm interested in and want to learn more about. In terms of MBBI, it's definitely a part of the local understanding and context and engagement of the peace building work we do. Our projects that we do internationally are not necessarily religious, and I use air quotes kind of purposefully in general, but the trauma of that community or the context of that area or the trainings that we do that are relevant to religious practices, or to take a prayer break if that is needed, or whatever those nuances may be, being well aware of those realities makes for more effective peace building. So I'll wrap up with and I know I've said it probably 5 or 6 times, and I'm going to keep saying it more because I think it's very important. Religion absolutely is the missing piece to a lot of these peace building, nonviolence, mediation, dialogue, what have you practices, because it is the quintessential and most influential, visible aspect of community dynamics and relations. So I'll wrap up there, but just by saying that in any of the work that you're doing, whether it's peace building or whether it's just business or whatever you're in the space of, understanding the realities of the people you're working with is so crucial. And for me, and at least this panel, religion is a very important value set that so many global communities really focus on and champion, and to ignore that in any peace building, mediation, nonviolent process is a disservice. And I'll end there. Thanks.
Thank you so much for your thoughts. I think it is focusing right on the point. And now we will turn to our dear listeners and guests, the public that is interested in this topic. And there are some questions already here. The first question is by Solomon Odera from Kenya, who is also quite interested in religion, as I know him, because we are together in Bangkok in a Rotary Peace Fellowship. Solomon, you want to ask question with your voice, or should I answer it? Or should I read it? Sorry.
Just go ahead and read it, Bedran. Thank you.
Okay. So Solomon asks, how do you deal with religious leaders who are non-partisan, who supports one side during violence? I do see this a lot in Kenya when religious leaders are very partisan. And is this curriculum for young people to ensure that non-violent skills or tools is used during violent situations? What is practicality of this tool during war? I might this connect to the question that I already prepared for all of our panelists, and this is how to approach the religious institutions from the side of NGO or from a peacebuilder network. What would be your practical suggestion? And in line of this, what Solomon asks, when you obviously have religious institutions and also individual clerics who are very partisan. We can go with this question in the order. Let's begin with Pastor Daniel.
Okay, thank you for that question. I think the right to approach to the leaders, just Mimi was talking about. And in my experience, I have dealing with the leader who potential respect for in the locally, as Ben was talk about. You have to deal with the local leaders, especially the tribal leaders who are respectful leaders. So you talk to that leaders and share the ideas, share the vision, and share your common goal, and let the leader understand your point of view, and then build trust with that. And that's, if that correct answer to from my point of view. But I think my point of view, my work has been successfully, but you need to get to know the person, the leaders who you think might be the potential leaders, and the leader who in the community that's a respectful leader, and you go to that person, get to know that person, build trust with that person, be friendly, be support to that whatever need of that leader, and then give them understand you and you understand them, and then you work toward your vision, toward your goal, whatever you want to do. As in my struggling here, that locally led, which is right, what Ben talked about, but except drama in format, that's very difficult to do that in my territory that I've been. It's difficult to talk about. It's difficult to share information. However, there's 2 points that Ben was talking about that I can make that possible. Capacity building, we can do that through the religions, a way of religion practice. That's how we do it. But eventually the drama in format that needs to be in place. Yes, that will be successful. You're right on that. I agree with you. Thank you for that.
Thank you. And I'm sure that what you, Pastor Daniel, said is exactly what Kanini experienced, going at first to one priest, then to another, until she found the one that can understand it. So knowing this, and with regard what Solomon asked, Kanini, how can peace builders overcome pessimism about the religious institutions?
I think for me, based on my experience, is first creating a very deep understanding and connecting with the people even before starting the job, starting the work with the people. Because if you insert yourself in the community, you know the connectors, the people connect others, and you know the people are ready to divide. And nowadays, I don't know in other countries, but in the African context, peace building have been commercialized by the local people, the religious people, and everybody. And you will know who is really interested in building sustainable peace and who is really interested in getting money out of the violence people are going through. Therefore, when you learn these people, you will be able to approach. And I thought achieving peace is a very long and slow process. And when I recognized this, I never went very quickly to bring peace quickly. I was only trying to find attempts to plant the seeds. And planting the seeds is identifying the right people. And after identifying people who are really passionate for peace, conscientizing them, and then finding how can these people work for peace. And based on my experience at the Grassroot, I found when you bring the real people who are interested to see peace, they will influence even the non-partisan to work for peace. Because I remember one time the politicians were dividing people. And when they noticed both the two ethnic groups were divided, they started also they were united. They also started now talking about unity, while they were talking division before. So when the right people unite, those with potential, even if they are few, they can start spreading slowly and influence the others. And it is very powerful for the people themselves to do that, but not me as an outsider. But I work and journey with them from behind. Thank you.
This is something so very important. Before I go to Catherine's question, I would just like to ask Benjamin, can you tell us, is there any way to build capacity among clergy for peace building? Is it necessary even to build a pre-step among the religious institutions for them to be prepared to accept such initiatives, what Kanini and Pastor Daniel is saying?
100%, absolutely. I think a lot of peace building spaces jump straight into the conflict solving space and do not focus on the pre-capacity work that's really necessary. One of the reasons I was so interested in any type of dialogue, specifically reflective structured dialogue, as it is now the center of my PhD, because it does exactly that. It is the clergy or otherwise prep work to gain perspectives, to learn about the components that make up the community, and to really do that prep before you jump into any conflict. And in every single case I have utilized, engaged with, and done training on RSD, the realities of the actual dimensions and trauma of that conflict come very much more clearly than whatever the outward conflict or violence may look like, because you obviously don't know everyone's perspectives, you just see the physical results. And when you have a very structured conversation to prep the community members, clergy or otherwise, on the dimensions of why we're doing this conflict analysis, why we're doing this peace building, why I think it's important this community grows, why this community is implementing it themselves, I'm not of the community, all of these pieces absolutely is solved during the dialogue. Dialogue is a very long time, and I think it's really important to say that any peace building process, when community or peace builders or mediators or whatever go straight to solve the conflict, you in essence do much more harm than good. quite frankly, because you don't pay attention to the community things that are necessary, the trauma, the religious identities, the nuance, whatever. And although you may solve the conflict, you don't attend to any of the underlying pieces. Whereas a slow, very patient dialogue process will probably triple the time that you expected, but in many cases, ensure there is no backsliding because the community does progress, engage, have conversations, know each other. So yes, I mean, clergy or otherwise, absolutely, in my opinion, mandatory. I'm not mandating anything, but at least in my thoughts, for peace building, to include a dialogue, conversation, capacity building, whatever the context may be. Obviously, will change what's needed, but to do something along those spaces well beforehand, and to be aware of the religious identities and or other nuances that make up that community. If it's intra-faith, so it's within the same faith tradition, I also think it's super important that the trainer is also of that same faith tradition. If it's interfaith, it's not as crucial, but to ensure that it's not a lopsided number of people at that table. So both really two separate things, but things really important to think about. If it's intra-faith, absolutely, again, I'm not mandating, but in my opinion, mandatory to include someone who is of that faith tradition to be part of the training, dialogue, hosting, capacity building space. And if it's interfaith, just to ensure that at least it's balanced in terms of those represented.
I completely agree. The interface and interface and intraface is very, very important distinction. And sometimes it's much easier to have interface dialogue than intraface. I would like to ask Catherine just to have patience, because we have very interesting question, and I have to say that I'm very subjective to this question because it's posed by Jure Žnidarić, who is from Slovenia and who is a seminarian in my church. So I will have the a kind of possibility to pose this question, but it is really interesting question. It says, inside the family, it's very important to work on peace building and non-volatile actions, non-violent actions, I mean, especially in this COVID-19 time. Can you please tell me, how can we include religion in solving internal issues and effectively working inside primary cell of community? I think this is really an interesting question, especially when we look at peace building and nonviolent action from a very macro level. How can we do it in a family cell or in a very, very local level? Can any one of you take initiative to answer this question, please? Anyone?
I'm happy to start. Again, as kind of I've been saying this whole time, religion, especially within the same family, is probably very contentious. People most likely have different interpretations of that same faith. And sort of as Vedran alluded to, intra-faith is, I think, much harder of a peace building space because of the maybe the same faith background, very different interpretations potentially. If anything, intra-faith is technically interfaith within the same religion, which we're not going to go down that rabbit hole, but I think Jure, and apologies if I'm mispronouncing your first name, raises is the, not only is it the religion component that makes family-based mediation difficult, but also just the family background, undoubtedly trauma is very much included here as well. So, I'll sort of scroll back up to what I said initially, locally led, trauma-informed capacity building absolutely is relevant for family-based mediations as well. And so, utilizing religion as a awareness of the nuances of that family or of that cell or community conflict, crucial. Yes, thank you, Catherine, for reiterating that in the chat. I also think, I'm kind of being a dead horse here, but I'm going to keep saying it. Dialogue is also really crucial, to sit the family members or community cell members down and actually learn their perspective. Hey, this is how I feel about this. This is what is important to me, or whatever the case may be. And again, religion is undoubtedly a part of that process. I think to shy away from religion or ignore it or not include it is not a helpful space in most peace building initiatives, but especially a family cluster that most likely has a very similar faith background that connects them. I don't know if Kanini or Pastor Daniel have more to add to that, but that's what I'll say.
I can say on that, when we look at a cell of the community, probably if it is religious community, or maybe they have certain religious values which brings them together. And that from this perspective, probably there might be other people who are interested in solving the particular problem which is taking place. And if they are convinced of the value and they want to keep those values, I guess I can approach individual people first if I'm put in such kind of a situation. We discuss about the value we share, and we reflect from where we are coming, what is happening in the current situation, and then we find solution of where can we go. And then we can now call the bigger society, and we discuss the issue together. That's my attempt on that.
Pastor Daniel, do you have a thought about family-based peace building?
I think this is very important, the family building based on religions based. It's always been, it's always history is building peace and harmony with the old, start with the family. That's religion is part of that, it's always been. And the people just shied away from this practice. And that's why the peace had been destroyed by all these in the world. Actually, you know, solidarity will have to get back to this root. That's the only way to building peace in the country, in the community, in the city, and between the people and the government. And they need to be understood that respectful with one another, respect religion, respect politically, respect the culture, the language, and respect tribal, different tribal. In my country, 63 tribal, and they need to respect one another. They need to bring up, you know, one another and lift up one another, and that's only be peace can be built. Thank you.
Thank you. I would now like to invite Catherine to pose her question. And also, if Steve has any question from Facebook, can you please deliver it to us? Catherine, should I read your question, or can you?
I'm going to go ahead. So thank you. I was checking out Facebook as well. Basically, so it's been a really interesting discussion, you know, waging around the peace building broadly, nonviolent action in so many different religions and country contexts. My question is, we know more and more from research in the field of strategic nonviolent action connected to peace building that unity is probably one of the most important pieces of being successful with systemic change or change for justice and peace in communities. And it's unity not in a small group, but across as many different parts of society, religion, ethnicities, tribal, caste, classes as possible. Getting on the same page with a common vision, mission, objectives. And that's kind of been mentioned several times. And the issue of power asymmetries, which really hasn't come up a lot, I would say within the interreligious dialogue, the fact of not always just being balanced and having the two sides, but realizing that one may be much more powerful than another. And that could be part of the issues within the society and the injustice. As long as there's a huge power imbalance, it's going to be really hard to move forward. And so part of nonviolent action is to kind of balance those out and build power for the powerless. And so I would just like to ask, especially those working in the field, Kanini and Pastor Daniel, but also Benjamin. How do you see this work that you're doing within a community, within one religion, but across, so like Buddhist and Christian in Southeast Asia, Muslim and Christian in parts of Africa and other mixes, either like Shia and Sunni in the Middle East, which I've studied extensively. How do you see that as part of building this unity, building this common objective and this common vision for change that then allows you to be more effective with mobilizing for a movement or a campaign? So I'd like to have a sense of how you're viewing that. Thank you.
Pastor Daniel, can you start with the answering?
How can we do that? Majority in Southeast Asians, especially Laos and Cambodia and Thailand, mostly Buddhist and Christian dominant in those regions. I think that my field is, again, back to dealing with the leaders who respect, and those are very powerful voice, because once they get the idea of peace building, once they understood the freedom of the human rights, and they can talk to the community, they can talk to their own people. I have been shared with them a lot, and they do that in the way of the culture practice, and they know how to deal with those issues. And more than I talk to them and hear and listen to them, is more important to listen to them, because they know more than we do. They understood what's going on in the locally and between the people and the government. I see a lot of struggling there, a lot of lawlessness, a lot of power misuse, and but the local leader will talk to both the conflict, both sides, bring them together, and that's how I deal with it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kanini, can you tell it from your perspective, please?
I think from based on my experience, the key thing is conscientizing people. That is creating awareness on the particular issue we are addressing, or the particular issue where we would like to build a common vision. And if this becomes an ongoing process, I believe in starting with a small group, and this small group joins you in the work, and you start creating awareness among many people, and then you'll find you are creating a common vision among many people, and then you find you still have so many agents working with you, not you alone. And this really, you can mobilize many people, and having the same vision, then they can work together and bring change in the particular situation there which is affecting them.
And Benjamin, how this works from international perspective?
I mean, I would say exactly the same things as Kanini and Pastor Daniel. It may be an international organization I work for, but it's all locally specific peace building work. So they being on the ground is identical to the peace building work MBVI does on the ground, just in a different community. So I don't really have a different answer, just that there are spaces for international organizations to provide a global perspective to a local peace building process. But again, if you don't include the local community members, you aren't really doing effective peace building. So I won't differ from what Pastor Daniel or Kanini said, but just sort of re-highlight the importance of including the local community members more than anything.
We are exactly 1 minute before we end. It's just now 90 minutes of this webinar. So I thank you all. And I would just like, before we thank for our organizers, to go just last round of everyone, all three of you, just say your final thought, encourage us a bit how to go on. just a few thoughts, please, and so we can continue with our idea of religion-based peace building included in the overall peace building and nonviolent action, please. Let's start this time from Benjamin, and then we go on.
I'm not going to say anything new that I have already, so I'll just reiterate the importance of dialogue, of trauma-informed, locally led capacity building, peace building processes. The only way to ensure the community has ownership of, but also is successful in resolving a violent conflict is to ensure they are engaged at every step of the level, and more than anything, they physically implement. Because I, as a part of international org, don't live in XYZ community. I am not the best person to solve it. End of sentence. So just to reiterate the importance of bringing in religion as it is a aspect of the community, but to include, engage, train, mentor, support, and empower local community members to resolve the conflicts that make up their communities. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Kanin, encourage us from Africa, please. It's a continent which needs so much of your energy and your ideas.
What I can conclude with is building relationship first before starting any peace work with the grassroots communities which are affected by the violence is a very powerful tool which can support you get many agents of peace from that particular area. And from this, it can help one to overcome so many challenges which you'll find on the way. And finally, religion has so many potentials which can be utilized to build peace in deeply divided societies. Thank you.
Thank you. And Pastor Daniel, inspire us for our work, please.
Well, this is very good. I think the community, international community, need to make a voice for the local community. And they are struggling. They are in terms of knowing their right and understand what the government's doing is very slim. And that need to be the international community need to go into the local and share with them and make them understand, empower them, and so they can be their own, stand in their own feet to deal with their own life. And that's very important right now as needed for me, that I understand that there's no way the local can dealing by themselves. If the community of the international community like us that come in to share with them and help them along the journey, struggling, and that will be solved the problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This has been a wonderful, wonderful webinar. And I would like to thank, first of all, our panelists, Pastor Daniel Chay, Ahmadullah Archiwal, Elizabeth Kanin Kimau, and Benjamin Lutz for participating here and sharing their ideas. It's been really, really interesting, and we can continue talking about this so much in advance, but unfortunately, we are challenged by time. As you know, there will be upcoming webinars. The next webinar will be on self-determination of struggles and environmental justice. And you just keep looking at our social sites and Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, wherever you can find us. There will be a new Eventbrite opportunity where you can, of course, join. I would like to thank our co-sponsors and our beautiful partners, Waging Non-Violence and Non-Violence International. And of course, from all of us from Solidarity 2020 and beyond, we would like to thank you for having interest for this topic, which, as you have heard from here, has so many importance and so many possibilities that we can, of course, explore and join together. So thank you very much. God bless you from my side, and have a nice day, evening, and night. Thank you.